Mr. Bowtie's Texas High School Sports Machine is driven by Henry Finley and McCombs Ford West, a proud supporter of all area local sports. McCombs Ford West, simply the best.
You'll be working umpire in the NFL. And it took a second for me to process what he was telling me. And I'm like, so what? Oh, wow. And so at that moment, it was just like everything, all the experiences of starting up until that moment kind of just flashed in front of my eyes. And it's a pretty cool moment.
I decided it was important enough that I better go ahead and step away from watch my daughter's softball game and take the phone call. And I step away and Garth gets on and he basically starts saying, Dwayne, I want to talk to you about some of your mechanics and some things we just need to talk about. And I'm like, really now? Okay, sure. Finally, he was like, Dwayne, actually, that's not the real reason I'm calling. I want to let you know that we're going to invite you into the NFL. And yeah, it was just excitement.
Figured something was up. But he said, FaceTime me, I have something to show you, so very cryptic. But when we got on the call, he basically kind of spilled the beans right away. And it was really cool.
You'll never forget when you get that phone call. And I'll remember where I was standing out there in the field, overlooking my daughter's softball game from a distance, getting that phone call.
Hey folks, Mr. Bowtie here. Keep banging home that subscribe button on your screen so that way you can stay up to date on all the great local sports coverage not found on TV or in a cheap web stream. And don't forget to hit me up on Twitter at Mr. Bowtie 1982. It's fast, it's free, and you're going to make my dogs think I'm the best person in the world. Thank you so much and enjoy the show. Hey folks, Greg Sherman. As always, check out my YouTube and my Twitter at Mr. Bowtie 1982 and the Texas High School Sports Machine. You may have noticed a few weeks ago my interview with the great Lo Van Pham, an official here in Texas, just hired as one of the 10 new rookies into the National Football League this year, with the season quickly coming up on us, just a few weeks away from getting everything started. Among the other new hires were 3 major college football referees hired into the umpire position. That's the offensive backfield. Maybe down the road, we'll see them at the white hat position. Joining me are Alex Moore, Dwayne Haight, and Brandon Cruz, all of them from different parts of the country. Alex Moore was in the ACC for a number of years, or should I say the SEC? We'll find that out in 1 second. Alex, first off, thanks for joining us from Florida.
Thanks for having me.
And we have Dwayne Haight. The last time you saw Dwayne Haight was the referee of the Alabama-Georgia National Championship game. We'll talk about that a little bit later if time permits. Dwayne, joining us from South Carolina. Really do appreciate your time, Dwayne.
Good to be here.
And joining us from Arizona, he's not even wasting time on wanting to get to the stadium. He wants to get there early, get ready, get going for his first game. Joining us from somewhere in Arizona is Brandon Cruz. Brandon was in the Big 12 Consortium and joins us from Arizona. Brandon, appreciate it, and thanks for getting an early start on the season.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's always interesting when you get so many new officials that come into the league, especially with how some of the hiring has changed, with the mechanics changing in the umpire position. We'll start with Alex Moore. And Alex, tell us maybe just a little bit about you for those who maybe do not know about you outside of your refereeing in the major conferences last year.
Well, I guess about me outside of officiating, I work for a allied healthcare school as a compliance manager, married with 3 lovely daughters and 1 dog. So that's pretty much the story of my life.
And Dwayne, we certainly know about you and being in the national championship game, but tell us maybe something about you besides what people saw in the national championship game.
Sure. So I'm a biostatistician by degree, and I work as a statistical consultant. I am married, have 3 children, 2 in college, 1 in high school. And when I'm not out in the field, I'm sitting behind a computer crunching some numbers.
And Brandon Cruz, who I got to see personally at the BYU Baylor game last year. They only had 2 penalty flags. So Brandon, obviously, and the crew doing a great job keeping it going. Brandon, maybe tell us just something about you that besides officiating, that way people can learn maybe just a little bit about you.
Yeah, so I grew up on a farm in a small little town called Pierre, South Dakota. Married with 3 kids. My oldest will be in high school next year, which is impossible to believe, but it's true.
That's the beautiful part about officiating is that you have men and women from all across the country, so many different diverse backgrounds besides what they do in officiating. Well, I'll ask each one of you, and I'll start with Alex and go in order. Tell me what it was like where you were when you got the call and your reaction when you heard that you had gotten hired by the big leagues.
So I was actually at home, and I was walking to the kitchen to grab something to drink. And when the phone rang, it was from Butch Hanna, which kind of caught me by surprise. I wasn't really sure why Butch was calling me because Butch was a trainer in the SEC also. So long story short, he proceeds to tell me that I'm losing my umpire from my college crew. And he knew that he and I had a very special relationship. So I was a little taken back. And then he was like, well, if you haven't heard the news, I can't really share it with you until the supervisor tells you. And I'm like, well, you've already shared it with me. So who's my new umpire? He's like, well, we'll deal with that later. But I can also tell you that you'll be working the umpire in the NFL. And it took a second for me to process what he was telling me. And I'm like, so what? Oh, wow. And so at that moment, it was just like everything, all the experiences of starting up until that moment kind of just flashed in front of my eyes. And it's a pretty cool moment.
I was at my daughter's softball game. She's in 11th grade and plays softball. And they were at a visiting school out in rural South Carolina somewhere. And I'm standing along the fence line and I get a phone call from Garth DeFelice. And I decided it was important enough that I better go ahead and step away from watch my daughter's softball game and take the phone call. And I step away and Garth gets on and he basically starts saying, Dwayne, I want to talk to you about some of your mechanics and some things we just need to talk about. And I'm like, really now? Okay, sure. Let's talk about some mechanics. Yeah, just some things I want to share with you that I think you can kind of work on. And so he started kept pulling me along and pulling me along and pulling me along. And finally he was like, Dwayne, actually, that's not the real reason I'm calling. I want to let you know that we're going to invite you in into the NFL. And yeah, it was just excitement. It was just, a great feeling. And, I appreciated the way he kind of, pulled me along a little bit and strung me along and just kind of raised the excitement. So it was a really great feeling. It's kind of one of those, like everybody says, you'll never forget when you get that phone call. And I'll remember where I was standing out there in the field, overlooking my daughter's softball game from a distance, getting that phone call. So it was a really neat experience.
That's amazing. We've had two incarnations of Ashton Kutcher's punked. Let's see, Brandon,
Exactly.
Were you punked also, or what's your story?
My call was from Byron Boston. Started with a text message. He said, hey, when you and your wife, Melanie, are together and available, FaceTime me. This is Byron Boston asking me to FaceTime him, which has happened exactly 0 times before. And then he, when he asked for Melanie to be included, my wife, figured something was up. But he said, FaceTime me, I have something to show you, so very cryptic. But when we got on the call, he basically kind of spilled the beans right away. And it was really cool because Byron's leader in our CFO West organization that assigns college football officials to the Big 12, Mountain West and Southland. So I've known Byron for a long time. So to get the call from him was really special.
And Byron Ball, all three of you are going to move into the umpire position, which it's been about 12 years since the umpire went into the offensive backfield. So I'll start with Brandon. We'll go the other way this time. How do you change your mechanics going into a different position, albeit you're still behind the offensive line? Is there any adjustment, or what kind of adjustments do you have to make?
Oh yeah. I mean, to me, it's an adjustment, starting, as weird as it sounds, just being on the left side of the quarterback. It's a same look, but it's different. I'm so used to being on the right side from the referee position. Now I'm on the left side. And then mechanics are a little bit different in terms of where you start looking at the snap, and then, but really the visual transitions are pretty much the same. You're just kind of working the opposite side of the line. And then obviously handling the football, marking off the penalties, that's a little bit more than the referee position. I'm fortunate because for the USFL season, this startup spring league this year, that's the position I'm working. So I'll have 8 games under my belt by the time preseason rolls around.
And Dwayne, you, of course, have worked a lot of high-profile games. We mentioned the national championship game, among many others. How do you adjust going from being the crew chief to now not being the crew chief in the NFL, and obviously hoping someday that you get a chance to be that crew chief in the NFL?
Yeah, moving to another position, it presents its own unique challenges. But one of the things I'm really going to appreciate about not being the referee, not being the crew chief, is seeing other styles of other referees and how they've done things compared to how I have done things in the past. But again, I understand the role that we have, the responsibilities that I'm going to have as umpire. And a lot of what, Brandon addressed is the view is going to be a little bit different, which again, they're similar, but different. And it's going to be those details that we got to make sure we master to understand what those differences are and what our roles and responsibilities are. And like you said, spotting the ball and, relaying and marking off penalties. Again, things that, we've all probably done at some point along the way. Back in 2014, when the center judge position came into college, I had the opportunity to work several games as center judge. And so again, it's going to go back and relearn a lot of that marking off penalties and, going through those mechanics. And again, we'll have a chance to do mini camps and other camps, so forth, before the season starts to master those, to kind of get that down. So I'm looking forward to it.
I'll get back to that center judge in a moment, because that's actually a really good point, since Walt Anderson started that in the Big 12 about 10 years ago. Alex, you've worked in the SEC, which, to be honest, it's about as close to a pro league as you're going to get with Alabama, with Georgia, with A&M. A lot of those crowds will average more fans than you'll see in a lot of NFL stadiums. So does that make it easier for you to adjust to the NFL, just because you've covered a lot of games involving college teams that have a lot of NFL guys on it and a lot of crowds that are bigger than what you'll see in some of these NFL stadiums?
I wouldn't say it makes it easier. I mean, it helps in the transition, but at the same time, as both Brandon and Dwayne have said, we're moving to a totally different position. So it's going to be a lot of learning on the fly and making sure I'm learning my position and not necessarily paying attention much into the crowd and all that. So it helps, but it's not something that's going to make my transition any easier. It's still going to be a lot of work to get to where I need to be.
Dwayne, you brought up the center judge position. We mentioned it was started by Walt Anderson about 10, 12 years ago when he was still supervisor of the Big 12. And you mentioned about how that may be an advantage to you and maybe an advantage to other officials in college that are hoping to get to the NFL, maybe become white hats. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, and it really is just more of the lines of, in the ACC, I believe it was 2014 when we started the center judge position. And again, just in college, working center judge, they're the ones marking off the penalties, handling a lot of the footballs and so forth. So again, going to that transition into the NFL as umpire, again, similar but different, a lot of the mechanics. But again, just trying to rethink back to those days, how we go ahead and mark off the penalties and how we transition and how we communicate with others. And, when the referee holds the substitution mechanics and get waved off and how we're going to back out of there. So again, all that hopefully will come back a little bit to me as we step out on the field and kind of learn these new mechanics.
Brandon, what do you think is going to be the biggest adjustment going into the NFL? You're coming out of the Big 12, where we know schools like Oklahoma and Texas, just like the SEC schools, can have more fans in the stands than the NFL and a lot more passion. But what's going to be the biggest adjustment going from those Saturday afternoon, Saturday night games to the Sunday afternoon games?
I think just, the volume of games and really pacing ourselves to make it through the season, 9 or 10 in the NFL. And then, that's basically midway through the regular season. So if you include preseason, it's just going to be a lot more games. And it's just that adjustment. And then making sure, I'm just disciplined to my own preparation and self-evaluation process week after week after week, taking all the feedback we're going to get from our trainers, our mentors, and all those great things that the NFL has planned out for us.
A lot of guys, when they get to the NFL, the players, they mention how they're going from 12 games, 13 games a year to 17 in the regular season, 3 in the preseason. If they get to the Super Bowl, it's potentially 21, 22. Alex, how do the rookies like you stay in shape for those extra games? Just because if you're not ready for it, you could have an injury or you could fatigue early since the season's longer. How do you and the fellow rookies and new hires, how do you all kind of adjust to a longer season?
Like Brandon said, you have to stay true to your regime. You have to make sure you're doing what you're supposed to do to take care of your body, get the rest that you need, but also stay focused mentally. So that way on the field, you're doing what you need to do. So I think it's a process, and it's one that we're going to have to learn and make the adjustment as we go, because to Brandon's point, we haven't been that far before. So And I think a big thing will be reaching out to some of the vets to see what they've done to help in their transition going from college to working 17, 18, 20 games or whatever. So.
One of the interesting caveats with the NFL tradition they've had, I think, the last 50 years is rookies are not eligible to work work a playoff game their first year. That's just part, I think, of the CBA. So, Dwayne, I'll start with you. I know you don't get every year. You hope to work a bowl game, or in the NFL, you're hoping to work the Super Bowl or at least work a playoff game. Since the rookies are not eligible for a playoff game the first year, what's your goals, or what's the end goal when you get to week 18 in January, trying to at least have the end of the end of your rookie season and hopefully start that playoff run your sophomore year?
Yeah, my goal is just to survive. I mean, we are drinking from a fire hose right now. All the information, the rules, the mechanics, philosophy, we're learning. So that's our goal. And, kind of like what Alex addressed and you addressed is the length of the season. As of right now, we have to be mentally prepared for what we're about to undertake. We don't know what we don't know yet. But, our season typically ends, in college at the end of November. And we know this season is going to run through December and early January. So that mental preparation, being aware of what is going to take place and just kind of knowing that's our goal for the first year, is to learn. We know we're going to make mistakes, but how are we going to learn from those mistakes? And how are we going to get to that final week of the season? And how are we going to have improved, hopefully, from week 1 through week 18 all along the way to help us get us prepared for the very next year? So, the fact that we don't have or possibly don't have a chance to work any playoffs or anything, that's fine. We're just so excited just to be here and to get the opportunity to work a regular season that's not even in our thought process right now. It's just kind of getting through this first season and learning and absorbing and, from all these great mentors, trainers, and everything that's available to us right now.
It feels to me like every game's going to be a playoff game, So, I mean, just the new caliber of football that we're fortunate to be involved with. I know we're not going to work actual playoffs, but right now every game's going to feel like a playoff game to me.
Alex, the league has done a really good job in the last 20 years or so where they work with officials as much as they can, so that way they can make the adjustment. It used to be in the 70s and 80s and 90s, you'd have officials that would be in and out after a couple of years, just not able to handle the transition. How do you handle that where you're going to be dealing with players that are making millions of dollars, with coaches who are high profile, even more high profile than the coaches you've seen in college? How do you not, I guess for lack of a better way to put it, how do you not get intimidated when you step out on that field?
I think as long as you're doing your job and like we're guardians of the game. And if we're doing that as an official, we're never bigger than the game. Working in the SEC, I was still just the guy in stripes. Nobody knew who I was. Nobody cared who I was. And that's going to be the same mentality that I take into the NFL. Nobody cares who I am. So as long as I'm staying focused and taking care of my responsibility, I don't necessarily have to worry about the fact that they're making whatever they're making. If I'm consistent with how I handle myself and the game, I think everything else will take care of itself.
In the final couple moments we have, I'll start with Dwayne and go to Brandon and finish with Alex. Just a thought on the excitement of getting to the NFL, what you're looking forward to, and being able to get to this new endeavor where only, I think, a little over 1,000 people have ever officiated in the NFL, or maybe even only a few hundred officiated. Just what you're looking forward to.
I'm looking forward to the opportunity to work with some of the best officials in the country, with some of the best trainers in the country, going to these new venues, just the experience, the crowds, the atmosphere of this whole thing. Again, it's all going to be new. And, we've worked, our officiating lives to improve and try to get to that next level and just try to be better. And so to have this opportunity is so unique, and you're just so honored to be there. But again, it doesn't change what we want to do. Is just kind of keep getting better. So just really looking forward to, again, just working with the new crew, working with these rules and the people and the players and the fellow crewmates with this great organization. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Really looking forward to it.
Working with the best of the best, most elite people at all walks of the football world is really exciting.
And Alex, we'll finish with you.
I just echo what both said. It's a tremendous opportunity to work with the best of the best, and I'm looking forward to it.
Gentlemen, we appreciate the time as always. That's Alex Moore, Brandon Cruz, and Dwayne Haight, all three big-time college football white hat referees now going to the NFL as umpires. Maybe we'll see them again at the white hat position down the road, but we definitely appreciate y'all's time. Wish y'all best of luck, and I guess Many Super Bowls to each one of you. Thanks y'all. Thanks y'all for the time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.